So, in a completely predictable turn of events, the Republican Party has greeted Abdul El-Sayed's primary victory in the Democratic Senate primary in Michigan by launching these kind of like cartoonishly Islamophobic attacks. So, Donald Trump posts this picture of himself and Melania Trump on the one side, and then Abdul El-Sayed and his wife, who's wearing a hijab, on the other, and the caption is two very different Americas. The National Republican Senatorial Committee has started referring to Abdul El Sayed as Abdul Rahman Muhammad El Sayed, right? Because his name wasn't Arabic sounding enough before, right? It's exactly the same thing they did with Barack Hussein Obama, because Barack Obama wasn't alien and scary enough. And a congresswoman from South Carolina named Nancy Mace put out this lovely tweet. She wrote, quote, "Every single Muslim holding public office in America is a Trojan horse and a threat to both national security and our republic." Just utterly sickening. And so I think the question for anyone in Michigan, but particularly for Jews, is this: do you want to be associated with this, right? It's the same question you had with Zohar Mamdani. Do you want to be associated with a political party and and a political ideology that, in order to maintain power, is willing to be nakedly bigoted against a group of people, in this case, Muslim Americans? And what I would suggest is that if the Republican Party is willing to do this to Zohran Mamdani and Abdul Sayed today, because they see a political advantage in making them seem alien and frightening because they are Muslim, they would do the same thing to Jews, right? This was done to Jews early in the 20th century, when Jews were depicted as socialists, anarchists, communists, left-wing radicals, dangerous. This is part of the reason that the United States would not let Jews in even after the Shoah, even after the Holocaust, when Jews were sitting in displaced persons camps in the late 1940s. The United States, the perception of Jews as communists was so thick that the United States was literally willing to allow people who were former Nazi war criminals into the United States before they allowed Jews, because of the same association of one particular ethnic religious group with the idea of being a threat to the United States. And anyone who, and we know that Donald Trump and his Republican Party do this for political advantage, right? There's no principle here. Anyone who knows anything about Donald Trump and Donald Trump's Republican Party knows that they're not doing this because Abdul Assayad is Muslim per se. They're doing it because there is a political advantage to demonizing Arab and Muslim people today, right? And if the politics were to shift and it would become more politically advantageous to do this to Jews, they would do this in a heartbeat, right? They would do this in a heartbeat because it's only about maintaining their political power. And I've got news for you. Given the shift that's taking place in public opinion on the right, listen to Candace Owens, listen to Nick Fuentes, listen to even Tucker Carlson. It is becoming increasingly politically advantageous to do this to Jews too. So you need people of principle who believe that bigotry is wrong. If you think it's a wise move to make a political alliance with people who are willing to use racism, Islamophobic, bigotry against Arabs and Muslims now because you think somehow they care about Jews, let's just remember the ad that Donald Trump ran in 2016, his final ad in 2016, which was about the menacing global special interests and just happened to show pictures of George Soros, Janet Yellen, and Lloyd Bankfein, who was then the head of Goldman Sachs, right? Three Jews in this image of these kind of classical notions that there were these shadowy interests that were out there basically trying to rob ordinary Americans blind, and mentioned Jews, right? So this idea that it is a safe bet to ally with a Republican Party that's willing to practice the most crude and blatant Islamophobia now, they will do the same thing to Jews the minute they start to see focus groups and the minute they start to see polls that show that's in their interest. And I know that there are pro-Israel folks that say that Abdul El-Sayed is doing that today, or Zohran Mamdani, because they're attacking AIPAC. No, not true. What Mamdani and El-Sayed are doing are attacking AIPAC because they are morally opposed to the policies of the Israeli government and because they believe that American politics is corrupted by big money, especially big money that works in secret. There is nothing anti-Semitic about that. It is completely different than the principle that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are operating on. Syed, like Mamdani, says again and again and again that he believes in the principle of equality under the law in the United States and equality under the law in Israel, Palestine. That's what Jews should want here. It's what Jews should want there. It is not bigoted to say that Jews and Palestinians should be equal in Israel, Palestine, and it is not bigoted to say that Jews should be treated equally in the United States. Is the antithesis of bigotry. And when I think about the way I would like American Jews and American Jewish leaders to respond to this rise of Muslim politicians like Zoran Mamdani and Abdul Sayed, I think about something that happened more than 20 years ago at the 2004 Democratic Convention. I remember going to the 2004 Democratic Convention to cover it. I was writing about it, and it happened that the convention coincided with Tisha B'Av, which is the day in which Jews mourn the destruction of both of the temples and other supposedly other terrible events in Jewish history. And I thought, what is it going to mean for me as a Jew, both observing Tisha B'Av fasting and also observing, going to this convention? And what I saw was that at the end of the night's proceedings, on one of the nights of the conventions, a group of Jews in the Democratic Party went to the floor of the convention, sat down on the ground as we are commanded to do on the holiday of Tisha B'Av, and began to read the Book of Lamentations and these medieval dirges that are traditionally read on Tisha B'Av. And I can't tell you how beautiful a moment that was for me as an American, as a Jew, to be able to do that on the floor of the Democratic Convention. This is what we should want for Abdul El Sayed and every other Muslim in the United States. We should want them to be able to have that same sense of ownership over the United States, that they can practice their faith anywhere and everywhere and still be understood as an owner of this country, not as a guest. And you know what? It is people who have that experience of exclusion and people who understand the taste of being discriminated against and people who speak in the name of equality under the law that are going to be our best protection for maintaining our ability to be proudly and openly Jewish and safe and free in the United States. If you think that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump and Nancy Mace and the National Republican Senatorial Committee will protect Jewish freedom and safety when they're willing to act this way towards another minority religion group just because they think it's good politics at the moment, you're making a profoundly, profoundly foolish decision.